somebody who feels that there's something maybe we haven't covered today that we should have? Oh.
I forgot Megan.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so if there's anybody out here that there's something that they really feel like we should have talked about today and haven't yet, we'd love to have you up here. One thing I will say as an academic panel, one thing I learned from teaching 7 years of college is when your audience was fading, and we're kind of noticing that throughout here. So what we are going to do is we're only going to tackle one question, but we're going to tackle a big one, and that is, what have we not addressed today that we should have? What have we not talked about that's important for us to talk about before we go into the individual sessions? And that's kind of what I'm going to have the panel talk about. They're looking at me very surprised, but they'll be good because we have talked about a lot of these things, and we want to bring out anything that we may have missed that's important. With that in mind, is there anyone who would like to join us up here who hasn't talked today? Can have Brian pick someone out if they'd like to. Oh, great. Join us on up. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll introduce ourselves real quick, and then we will get to the question of the day. My name is Holly Baxter. I'm with Strategic Knowledge Solutions out of Dayton, Ohio, and I enjoyed the road trip up here. It was awesome. So, Brian?
I'm Brian Newton. I'm adjunct faculty here at Kent State. I teach the Knowledge Elicitation and Expertise Management course, and I have my own small business, Perigene Technologies, which I was quite proud of the dean for pronouncing correctly this morning. That was well done.
I'm John Lewis, the author of a book called The Explanation Age.
And I'm Blake Melnick. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer for the Knowledge Management Institute of Canada. I'm the one Canadian representative.
I think you know me, Madeline. I stepped up here because I do teach, and so I'll take it from that perspective. And I have written a book too, also called Writing the Plan.
We have not only speakers up here, but a bunch of authors. And so like I said, what I do want to do is I want to talk about things when we look at where we're seeking advice and what we're going into tomorrow as groups. My one question for each of the panelists is, what have we not talked about today that we should have? And John's really looking like he wants to start here.
No, it's just that I have a question. Just to clarify, maybe just for myself, or maybe I'm the only one. Are you abandoning this as an academic panel?
No.
Or is the question within an academic?
Within the academic panel. So what have we not addressed today, but still keeping within the academic? So John, since you had that wonderful question, you have the microphone, go ahead and start for us.
What have we not addressed? Well, I don't know where to start. A lot of things. I think that from a broad category standpoint, I think that we have talked about things about knowledge management that we have to do that may affect broad audiences, including students to some degree. Certainly at a master's level, there's a question of how do you move up into PhD and down into bachelor's level and so forth. I think that what we haven't talked about are implications of what we know already from knowledge management and how we move that into schools, especially K-12 and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of focus on teaching KM to people, and I think that what we haven't talked about is taking the ideas that we know about it and influencing with it in other areas.
That's great. Using that KM to influence in other ways. So how about our international contingent?
Well, I think, thinking about education in general, because I think that's the one piece we have missed, is discussing what the center can do vis-a-vis education. What I've discovered, at least in my practice in knowledge management, is that education is by far and away the cheapest and most effective way to accelerate the change management process within organizations. Okay, so when I work with organizations, and what I usually discover, and I do a lot of work, I do a lot of knowledge audits for large companies and government organizations. And what I discover after the audit is there's a complete disconnect around what knowledge management means to people. And that disconnect is usually along the lines of demographics. So for example, the older demographic thinks knowledge management is about standard operating procedures and putting them out on the internet so everybody can find them and follow. The younger generation talks about wikis and blogs and engaging external stakeholders in the knowledge process. So developing a foundational knowledge management program to teach key concepts about what knowledge management is, what it isn't, and develop that common foundation of understanding does a tremendous amount to accelerate that change management process. Because now all of a sudden people can have conversations and they know what each other are talking about. And that is really, really important. And we discovered this a number of years ago, that really developing that foundational program, and I delivered a lot. I delivered to executives, I delivered to employees, I delivered to management and mid-level management, and it really, really helps accelerate that change management process, puts everybody on the same page. So I think it's very, very important that we look at what the center can deliver in terms of educational offerings, products, and so forth. I also think, there was a gentleman by the name of Perlman in the late 90s who coined a term called hyperlearning, where he said that the gap between learning and work would go away. And I think that's true. So I think there's a real need now, again, connecting education to the workforce, there's a real need for just-in-time, on-the-job, and as-needed training on a continuous basis. People are not going to be able to rest on their degree for their career. They will constantly have to be learning, relearning, taking courses to keep abreast with change. So these are areas in which I think this institute can really excel and offer some tremendous things for people. And when we talk about knowledge management, we're really talking about a broad spectrum of things, aren't we? We're talking about succession planning. We're talking about onboarding. We're talking about performance management. All of these factor under the umbrella of knowledge management. So these are workshops and programs that can be offered to companies based on their needs. That I think could be very effective.
Thank you very much, Blake. Madeline.
I think one of the areas that we haven't talked about is one that I encounter a great deal when I'm working with adults, is that their educational process has educated them to receive knowledge. Sit in class, learn, and that's learning, that's education. I want to see knowledge management really begin at the center, or whatever you want to call it, really begin to tackle this issue of how people can learn how to learn for themselves. I've done a lot of research and talking with world leaders in particular subject areas. Executives in corporations, how do they keep themselves current? And they had to struggle to learn how to do that for themselves. And it's not going to the mountain to get the knowledge. It's figuring out the sources that they needed, the techniques that they needed, and it's a whole different arena. And if we could understand that better and teach that, I also think it'd be terrific if line managers understood that, because there's a real different way of which you interact with your staff when you understand they have to develop themselves.
Very much. Brian has also offered to do a song and dance for us here.
Right, just to wake everybody up. So I think to get back to your question of what we haven't touched on here, we've touched in various places we've touched a lot on knowledge. We've touched a bit on expert systems, knowledge models, doing interviews to help experts articulate what they know. What we haven't really looked at, and I think that the center would be well advised to include, is work in other disciplines. Cognitive science comes to mind, and related disciplines that have many, many decades of experience of actually looking at how people accomplish work in the real world, about how expertise develops in organizations, using on-the-job training and apprenticeship models that have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. There are findings, there are methods, there are tools in those other disciplines that the center ought to be including. I think actually one of the reasons that I was invited to join the faculty by Denise is because that was a piece of the knowledge management curriculum that needs to grow. And as one of those people that does the interviews that folks like or don't like, I can suggest strongly that being able to do the sort of on-the-job training and the sort of learning that we'd like to see people do is a skill in and of itself. You see a lot of what passes for knowledge management includes black boxes of made a decision here, or I just knew. And what you see in the workplace is a lot of junior folks who are trying to understand and appreciate all the complexity of the work that goes on, just nodding their heads when the expert says, well, you'll learn that over the years. You need that experience. You have to get out there and do it. And so we need to start to build models and tools for that knowledge exchange, that knowledge transfer to be effective in the sense that people are really focused on expertise and aren't satisfied with answers that just suggest, well, you'll pick it up along the way. We need to provide those tools to the folks who are doing the learning, that is, who are trying to accelerate their own achievement of expertise. And we need to enable the experts themselves to recognize when novices, when junior people need the help to articulate with the expert what the expert knows. Experts are notoriously bad and have a lot of trouble in just articulating what they know. They know so much, it's so rote, that they struggle to be able to teach somebody what they know. Sometimes people can learn it by watching, sometimes people can learn it by studying, but I think many of us here recognize that it's that sort of one-to-one connection that people have in the context of doing the work itself, where real knowledge happens. And yet so many opportunities are missed because people don't have the skills to really unpack, well, what does it mean to make decisions here, okay? And as we begin to unpack those things in the one-to-one and the one-to-many context, we can build the kind of knowledge models that were referenced this morning. But we need to provide people skills to be able to help the articulation happen. Those knowledge models that Mills was kind enough to share with us this morning were built on fairly structured, well-organized, well-defined domains. In other areas of work where the knowledge models are much messier because the work is much messier, the problems are much messier, the solutions are much messier, the goals are very uncertain. Those knowledge models look a lot different. They do share a structure, but being able to help somebody articulate all of the dependencies that they think about in the context of making that blink decision, those are the kinds of areas of knowledge that I think the center would do well to focus on, and that may mean bringing in some other disciplines that have the experience to be able to inform this kind of knowledge sharing.
Great, thank you very much, Brian. One thing that we'd kind of like to do in the last 10 minutes here that we have is, as an academic stakeholder group, the ideas we have and what we do impact a lot of you. Actually, it impacts everyone. And so what I'd like you to think about is just take a couple minutes to think about and talk with people around you are, what are any challenges or opportunities that we should consider as we kind of go to our small groups tomorrow from an academic perspective. So if you can just take a couple of minutes there with the folks at your table and just say, what are any challenges or opportunities we should consider as we move forward? And then we'll come back and we'll ask some of you what those are so we can take them into consideration tomorrow. Okay, what we'd like to do is I'd like to get like 3 or 4 people. And what I'm going to ask you to do so everyone can hear you and it's good for blood flow this late in the afternoon is come on up here and tell us what some of those opportunities or challenges could be for us. So, great. We have a volunteer.
Okay, I think the university of tomorrow is going to be really different. I think we're going to be able to start packaging up knowledge into advisors and assistants. We could have talked about that a little bit in the future. But what does that mean you do in academia? You try to do the retrofitting of the old knowledge to the, to the old wine bottles. I think you're out there inventing new knowledge. You say, oh, well, how could you have these legal assistants and something? Well, you start packaging all the knowledge in that subject domain, but oh wait, this is a legal reasoning environment in which we also can figure out also add all of the law and the regulatory and the legal interpretation. So if I can have a legal assistant, a brief that can withstand legal scrutiny, or a Watson, who goes to medical school, medical advisor who can give quality diagnosis, which again can withstand legal challenge. This is a different kind of world, and it puts us into an environment of labor arbitrage and definitely redirection of how we're doing. What the heck is anybody in academia doing to anticipate this and start to prepare for this kind of disruption?
Thank you very much.
Sure. We were talking about how traditional ways of teaching may need to be challenged and changed. And I think, Blake, you were hitting on it earlier. As a second grader is pitted against all other second graders in that classroom, and whoever has the best score on the test is the best student in that classroom. When they get out in the real world and start working, Now all of a sudden they're taught that high-performing teams are the places that really excel. So there needs to be a challenge within our school networks that really need to be pushed toward teaming and succeeding as a team. So there's that piece, and then we also said, the second piece is how do you connect these schools to corporations or government? And then on a background to close that circle.
Great, thank you very much. Come on up, Bo.
My challenge is based on your response to a question, Holly. I think there's a challenge to academia to step up and not let what a student is willing to pay for drive the full curriculum. I understand that there has to be a return to the student, but the student won't necessarily see all of the things, the background pieces. For instance, put the study, you wanted to go back to those other fields. Show them the relationship between what we're doing and the physical sciences. Tell them what epistemology is and why it's important. Tell them what ontologies are. Tell them what's important. No, there is not a block on a resume that says, yes, I studied epistemology. But the stuff you studied may not make any sense unless you have the foundations. My challenge to academia is make sure that you make the best use of this center to educate all of the stakeholders on the fundamentals.
Thank you very much, Bo. Brian.
My question is one related to incentives, and I think this gentleman's question applied to it. You know, we form incentives that govern our lives very early on, and let's just talk pre-K, and rewards. Well, that makes its way all the way into the workforce. And so the question is, we have incentivized and rewarded workers for their knowledge. And we hire and put out, you know, searches for very specific knowledge in very big quantities, and then we pluck them out of a sea of millions. And now you're asking that person who is such a one-of-a-kind valued asset to share it and give it away to the organization. How do you incentivize that? How do the HR policies, how do the employment structures, how do the promotion structures of old accommodate this new reality of sharing, growing, giving that which makes you unique away?
Thank you, Brian. Very good question. Edwin.
My question is, to reduce the lag time between what's academically available to what the workforce needs, I think the center would give you the transverse. You would be able to actually make more predictive analysis and experimentation to let academia actually lead in conjunction with the workforce versus the lag. And also, I would also like to see base across every academic structure as far as schools and what's being taught as far as degree programs. They'll all contain knowledge management-based courses.
Thank you very much, Edmund. We're going to take two more people, and then we'll finish up.
My name tags at my chair, Dean. That's the from video. This is similar to a couple of the thoughts, but stated maybe a little bit differently. Earlier today, Madeline said kids are naturally curious knowledge seekers and not afraid to fail. So my question to the academic community is there some place in our current process where we're ruining that?
Good question. Really good. Mike?
So my question that I'd like people to think about as they talk about this tomorrow is our list of stakeholders too broad? And as a center, can we address their specific needs both effectively and simultaneously?
Great. Yeah. Okay, 2 or 3 sentences, then we'll wrap up.
I haven't heard anybody talk about how we can teach the students to market knowledge management.
It's a really good point. And I want to thank everyone for their input because you'll notice that the group that will be done first tomorrow is us. We got everyone's input already. But no, I want to thank everyone for their input, especially the panel up here, and for hanging in with us this late in the day. So I will hand this back over to Denise, or is Dan, or are you going to take it? Okay. She's right there. She's coming. We have solved all of your problems, Denise, so.